Hey, welcome back. So, I said I was going to do this every week, and I'm going to do it every week. So, I had a new idea, and I think I kind of got this from one of Alt's comments. If I make this kind of like a journaling kind of a thing, just like talking about don't talk about big like general things, talk about like specific, okay, what am I doing this week, and just make it like a journal kind of thing, and like how am I dealing with this thing, and what do I think about this thing. I don't know, it's gonna evolve over time if I keep doing it every week, which I want to, and we'll see what comes of it. So this week's gonna be a little weird because my idea was to talk about church and religion, which if I start talking about it, I might like devolve into like a thing that I don't want it to, like a general thing of like, oh, this is religion and gay people or whatever. But this is something that I'm dealing with right now. It's pretty important to me. My job's been going well, and I talked about that, and my family, everything's good. So like the biggest thing for me right now is religion, I guess. So I moved to this new area, and I'm a Christian, and so I'm like, I gotta find a church. And this is the first time I've ever had to find a church, because I usually just went with my parents. So it's kind of interesting to be like, okay, let's go to this church this week and see what they say. So when I first moved in, a lady next door came to me and was like, hey, you want to come to church with me? And so I went with her last week. And everybody was very nice to me, I should say. Like, they're all good people, but I didn't like the service. I didn't like what the pastor was talking about. It's important. Like, I want to talk through, like, what am I looking for in a church? I don't even know. I would just go wherever my parents went and just be like, okay. And when I went to church, it made my parents happy, so that's why I did it. So I have to be like an adult about this and be like, okay, which church am I going to go to? So now I have to think like, well, what do I want in a church? So it was very clear to me that the church that I went to last week was not what I'm looking for. I've only been to one service, obviously, and I can tell they put a lot of emphasis on something that I don't like, which is, I don't want to say like, oh, they're conservative, they're super conservative. They are, but that's not, I don't want to say it like that. I want to say like, they put a lot of emphasis and they get stuck. I feel like a lot of churches in America, right now, conservative churches, they're getting stuck in like this culture war thing of, they feel like atheists and other religions are kind of taking over, and they're trying to push back against that. And so in the sermon, the pastor was talking about Revelation and the end times, and he's saying like, the sign, he gave an example about, he watched a Facebook video of a lady reading a book in like a school board meeting, and it had like sexual language in it, and she was reading it, and the guy was like, oh man, it's the worst language I've ever heard, I can't even say it here, and it was so terrible. And he's like, I don't know if you guys are feeling it, but I'm feeling it, like this is the sign of the times, like the culture is getting further away from God, and if we read in Revelation, like it could be close to the end times. Maybe it is the church's responsibility, but I don't feel like it's my responsibility as a Christian to push back against non-Christians. It doesn't make much sense to me, like, well, they're not Christians. Obviously, they're not going to act like Christians. What do we expect? Our job as Christians kind of is to, like, convert them or whatever, I guess. So, like, yelling at them and telling them that they're being sinful and like, and even being like patronizing about it, like, oh, like you're sinful, but Jesus will save you. It's like, I'm not being sinful. What are you talking about? that school board thing is like, does he understand, like, 500 years ago people used to kill each other every day? Like, how is the idea that the culture is getting further away from God is something that I've never agreed with. But that's a whole other topic. So that's something that I obviously don't want in a church. I don't want this constant discussion about culture war and, like, people who aren't Christians, like, they're taking over and we gotta be Christianier and we gotta fight back and we gotta stand. Oh, I gotta turn off the heat. So yeah, I didn't like that church, and that was why. So, like, having a lot of people there that were really nice to me, and when I went there, like, I actually talked to people, which was weird, and I felt like it was a little bit easier because I felt interesting because I had just moved here, and so they were asking me questions like, oh, where'd you move from? And like, oh, New Jersey, that's so far away, where are you working? And I actually had answers, and I felt interesting, like, talking. I guess one of my main problems, like, when I talk, I never feel like I'm saying anything interesting, so that's why I never do it. But that's typically, it's going to be easy to do that the first time you meet people, but then what do you talk about the second time? I don't know. Nothing else is interesting about me. I went to school, and then I moved here, and that's it. So I don't know what else to talk about. But having people who are nice to you, and that's important at a church, obviously. Even though I don't like when people are nice to me because that means I have to talk to them. But I didn't have that problem last week, so... But yeah, definitely... I don't want to go to a church where they're watching Facebook videos and critiquing it. Okay, like, that's a red flag for me, okay? Maybe that's what you want, but that's not what I want. So, I'm going to go to a different church next week, or this week, and I watched one of their sermons online. And, well, actually, I watched two different churches. In one church, it's the same thing. It's interesting how all the churches, like, conservative churches, are talking about this culture war stuff, and, like, gay people constantly, they're, like, obsessed with it, even though it's, like, not that big of a deal in the Bible. They just random, like, one verse in the New Testament says, like, oh, being gay is kind of bad, and then that's it. But I watched one sermon, and he was talking about how he met this person who was gay, and then she found Jesus, and then she didn't want to be gay anymore, and that was the story. But he talked about that for like 20 minutes, and that was part of his sermon, so I'm like, okay, I don't want to go to that church. And then I watched another service, which was good, and I think this is the one I'm going to go to. And he was talking just about whatever, random love. I know if you're like a person who's been a Christian for a long time, you just be like, oh, like, that's just like surface level stuff. I want to get deeper. Like, oh yeah, of course, love your neighbor, obviously. But that's what he's talking about. I don't remember exactly, but I don't remember him saying anything that made me, like, be like, ugh. But then I looked on their website, and then obviously they have the thing of, like, our tenets, and tenet number 11 was, we believe in the sanctity of marriage, and being gay is bad, and men and women only. I'm like, okay, I understand that it says that in the Bible. But I don't... It's a hard thing. Sometimes I feel like when you're a pastor and you have to give a sermon every day, like, obviously the first week you talk about, okay, love your neighbor, and the second week you talk about, okay, love God, and then maybe you talk about, like, the Israelites and slavery. Okay, that's week 3. But then week 4, okay, well, you're looking through the Bible. Okay, what do we talk about? And you're like, well, there's this one verse in Romans that's like being gay is bad. So like, okay, let's talk about that. Sometimes I think they're kind of looking into it a little bit too much. When it really is, it's more simple sometimes than people make it, of just like, I don't know, but like if I was a pastor, what would I do? The first week I'd be like, okay, love your neighbor. Second week, love God. And then, okay, third week, what do I talk about? Love your neighbor again? Mr. Pastor, we already talked about that. I know, I don't know. Frantically looking through the Bible. Well, I'm at that. Oh yeah, I forgot I did that already. We're gonna talk about gay people again. Here we go. I know I'm kind of, by talking about them so much, I'm kind of going against what I'm saying. Is like, well, it's not a big deal. But it is a big deal for the church. Like, 2 separate sermons I saw on Sunday both talked about it. I've talked about it before, but I just don't understand. If 2 gay people, they're gay, Christians will accept, like, okay, being gay, a good Christian will accept, like, okay, being gay is not a choice. God made you that way. Okay, so gayness is a thing that you can accept. Okay, so a gay person falls in love with another gay person. And they're Christians. They've accepted Jesus. They've repented. And they say they love each other, and they pray, and they go to church, and they read the Bible. And they still love each other. What do? How can that love be wrong? Love can't be wrong. God is literally love. So if 2 people are Christians and they love each other, how can that love be wrong? Love can't be wrong. Because sometimes you'll hear a Christian say something like, well, like, yeah, you're gay, I accept that, being gay is a thing, but like, just don't act on it. But that's admitting that love is wrong. If you can't love somebody, then it can't be wrong. That's my problem that I always have. I've mentioned it a bunch of times, but I think that's as simple as I can say it. So yeah, if I was a pastor, I'd be like, I wouldn't talk about gay stuff that much. I'd just be like, you're gay, come to church. We don't care. Be gay. Do gay stuff everywhere. I don't care. I don't know. Like, you love each other. How could a pastor ever say, like, well, don't be with the person you love? And that's why all these pastors are so worried about, like, oh, everybody's leaving the church. And they'll say something like, oh, because of the culture and because of the internet or something. And I'm like, it's because people are looking to the church and they see hate. They see, like, you want to take away love from people? That's not good. If you're not a Christian and you're not in the Bible or whatever, and you look at the church and you're like, they hate gay people? I don't want to be a part of that church. Men have to be manly and women have to be womanly. What does that even mean? That's your weird definition of man and woman. That's dumb, and I don't want to be a Christian. That's why people aren't Christians. I don't know, a lot of Christians want to blame other things instead of the way we talk about stuff. And I mean, I'm sure I'm not a good Christian either. So I don't know what I want. I guess if you're watching this and you're not a Christian, you would be like, and you've watched all my videos or whatever, you'd probably say like, well, why do you even want to be a Christian if you don't, you don't seem like a Christian and you don't talk or you don't act like it? Why do you even, you don't have to if you don't want to. First of all, being a Christian is so easy. all you have to do is go to church and pray. And it's like, it's already ingrained in me. I don't mind doing it. It just feels like, I don't like it, but I don't like anything. So, what else am I going to do on Sunday morning? I'm going to sleep in. I do that on Saturday. So I go to church. It's not a big deal to me. If it was like this huge commitment, maybe I wouldn't do it. Or maybe if my parents, I should mention, my parents are Christians and they're like the good kind. They're like the loving kind. So that's why I'm still a Christian, because I never looked at them and associated Christianity with like hate or fear. They never made me afraid of God or afraid to be a Christian. Like, oh, don't do this or God's gonna hate you, or when you go to church, like, listen, or I'm gonna smack you when you get home or something. They were never like that. So I don't associate Christianity with fear. So I still want to be a Christian. And maybe, I don't know, this is probably a weird way to start off, but I've talked about Christianity before, but I just mean like, maybe I should have started a little bit broader about like growing up as a Christian and talk about all that stuff. I could do that later, but this is more immediate. Like, I'm going to church and I gotta find a new church. And this is kind of like gonna be a journal for me. Next week, maybe I'll talk about work, or I'll talk about, oh, I went to a baseball game, or I went to a restaurant and I had anxiety. And I'll just keep trying, like every week, try to talk about something. But so I should sum up the video. So yeah, I don't know. Is that interesting, or does that make any sense? Like, I'm looking for a new church. That's it. And I'm a Christian. And I'm struggling with the stuff that I hear, and I just be like, okay, I gotta find something that I like. This will be the last thing I say. I know I've already kind of talked about it too, but like, I know it's hard because when you're a church, your whole foundation is the Bible. So like, but I need a church that's like just a little bit less literal and a little bit more like, okay, we obviously have to love people. That's the most important thing. So if a verse in the Old Testament that Paul wrote 2,000 years ago, one section of one verse where he was like, a man with a man is bad, if that doesn't make sense in a modern context and it doesn't involve any love and it doesn't make sense, like, that's okay. We can reinterpret it. Like, it doesn't have to be super literal, all of it. I don't know if there's any churches like that exist, especially up here, but I think I'll just end up probably going to this second church that's like the best you can get, which is like, they just talk about love, and humility is another thing that I like a lot, and like, don't be proud. And love your neighbor, love God, pray, trust faith, and let's just not talk about the gay stuff, because if we do, we're gonna say that we don't like them. That's what I'm assuming like most churches do now, is like they just don't talk about it. But yeah, I've yet to hear a church talk about certain topics in a way that I like. Just like the culture war stuff, I guess. Anything that involves like other cultures and like, oh, Muslims are bad and atheists are bad and LGBT people are bad, and like, we need to fight against the encroaching badness. We need to stand firm. No, Jesus didn't stand firm. He let people kill him. He wasn't like, no, you're not going to kill me. I'm right. I know, because it says in the Bible. He was like, I know I'm right, so you could go ahead, kill me. I don't care. Anyway, so that's my religion day. And nobody gave me any topics last week, so I blame you. That's why I'm talking about religion. So next week, probably politics, right? No, never politics. Religion is an important thing to me, but politics isn't. Which is probably why sometimes I bump up against like religion, because religion and politics recently gets so intertwined, and I'm just like, I just want to focus on religion. Why is everybody mixing them together? It's not like a Reese's cup. They don't go good together. You got your religion and my politics. But yeah, that's it. So I don't know. You want to talk about religion in the comments? I know that's dangerous, but obviously I don't have anybody really watching anyway, so the worst thing that could happen is like one person will be really upset, and then I can handle one person that's upset because I'm just like, oh, okay, your perspective is valid, and let's talk about how you feel. I think the problem is when you get like thousands of comments and you're like, oh, everybody's yelling at me, I don't know what to do, I just said this one little thing and everybody's yelling at me. But that's not gonna happen to me. So I'm fine. How are you doing? And next week we'll figure out what to talk about, and I'm doing well. So thanks for rooting for me if you're watching. I do get the feeling like people are kind of rooting, like, come on, Anthony, you could do it. So thanks. But yeah, see you tomorrow.